The coworker who surprises you with coffee each morning, the friend who insists on doing favors you never asked for, the partner whose unrelenting generosity leaves you subtly uneasy, the organization that gives you perks while slowly steering your decisions, the magnetic leader whose compassion makes disagreement feel like betrayal. What ties these seemingly generous gestures together? Each is an example of influence disguised as kindness, a subtle form of psychological control that often goes unnoticed. Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung observed that the most insidious forms of manipulation aren't the ones that provoke resistance, but the ones that slip beneath it. The most intense conflicts, Jung wrote, if overcome, leave behind a sense of security and calm. But what happens when there's no conflict to begin with? When control wears a warm, welcoming smile? The unsettling reality is that kindness, whether sincere or calculated, can be one of the most effective tools of manipulation. It enters through our emotional gates, forges unseen obligations, shifts power dynamics, and convinces us to be thankful for the loss of our autonomy. Jung's insights into the unconscious layers of human behavior reveal how kindness can be used as a tool of control, how it plays out in our relationships and institutions, and why identifying this pattern is crucial if we want to preserve real psychological freedom in a world where dominance is often cloaked in goodwill. The psychology of obligation. There is no coming to consciousness without pain, Jung famously said. But what happens when that pain is preemptively numbed? What if we're not manipulated through conflict, but comfort? This is the hidden power of kindness as control. It creates obligations we never agreed to. When someone does something generous without being asked, it activates deep-rooted social norms around reciprocity. We feel indebted, even though we never signed up for the exchange. It becomes an unspoken contract with invisible terms. Compare how we react to direct demands versus unexpected favors. A request prompts analysis. Is this fair? Do I agree? What if I say no? But acts of kindness sidestep this filter. We don't think, we feel. Gratitude, warmth, even guilt. These emotions short-circuit our critical thinking, making it feel wrong to question the gesture. Jung explored this in his analysis of the mother archetype, noting that its darker side appears as over-nurturing, kindness that binds, not frees. Nothing has a stronger psychological influence on children than the unlived lives of the parents. He wrote, showing how expectations are often passed through well-meaning actions. In daily life, this dynamic shows up constantly. The unsolicited help from a coworker, the surprise gift that now demands a return gesture, the praise that makes us feel like we have something to prove. These small acts quietly build a ledger of psychological debt. Their power lies in their subtlety. Demands can be denied, expectations can be discussed, but these emotional debts operate in silence, felt, not spoken. Their influence grows precisely because they remain unseen. The shadow side of giving. Jung's concept of the shadow, the parts of ourselves we reject or ignore, sheds light on why kindness so easily becomes a tool of control. Everyone carries a shadow, Jung wrote, and the less it is integrated into our conscious life, the darker and denser it becomes. When people give compulsively, excessively, or manipulatively, they may be acting from this unconscious shadow. That's where unacknowledged needs, hidden resentments, and repressed desires live. A favor that seems generous on the surface may, deep down, be an attempt to secure loyalty, admiration, or control. The person may not even realize it. This is why kindness can be so disarming, because it often comes from people who see themselves as good, selfless, even saintly. But the more a person disowns their own need for control, the more that need shows up in distorted, hidden ways. The giving becomes a performance, a way to maintain power while appearing virtuous. Jung believed true self-awareness required facing the shadow, not just the light. Until we do, our attempts to do good may actually serve our own ego more than the person we're helping. In relationships, this shadow dynamic can trap both giver and receiver in a loop of unspoken expectations, guilt, and dependency. Real freedom, Jung argued, comes not from comfort or avoidance, but from confronting the full truth of who we are, including our need to dominate, to be needed, and to feel morally superior. Recognizing the shadow behind the smile is the first step toward breaking free. Giving can conceal unconscious drives, a hunger for power, a need to feel superior, a desire to create dependency, or an impulse to bind others through obligation. When these motivations remain unacknowledged within the giver, their influence grows stronger because they wear the mask of generosity rather than dominance, selflessness rather than hidden self-interest. That's why certain acts of kindness feel subtly stifling, even though they appear well-intentioned. Think of the manager whose personal gifts quietly demand loyalty that extends beyond the job. Or the parent whose long-remembered sacrifices become leverage to steer their adult children's decisions. Or the friend whose generous gestures seem to set the stage for future calls for attention. Jung observed, "Where love rules, there is no will to power, and where power predominates, there love is lacking. Yet the most effective manipulation blends these forces, exerting control under the guise of care." The illusion works because we've been taught to see kindness as morally unquestionable. We're not just discouraged from challenging it. We're made to feel wrong for even suspecting an ulterior motive. And when the giver isn't aware of their own controlling intentions, the effect becomes even more potent, a trap where any reaction besides gratitude feels socially inappropriate, even morally flawed. Projection, the anima and animus. Jung's theories of the anima, the unconscious feminine in men, and animus, the unconscious masculine in women, offer deeper insight into how kindness can subtly control through relational projection. These contrasexual archetypes often emerge not directly, but through projection, when we see in others traits we have not acknowledged in ourselves. When kindness becomes fused with such projections, it takes on a more powerful, binding quality. The giver becomes more than helpful. They become an ideal, someone onto whom we project our deepest emotional yearnings. This can breed not just gratitude but emotional dependency and even devotion. In romantic dynamics, this may appear as one partner endlessly anticipating needs and offering comfort, replacing real emotional connection with service. The recipient, over time, stops tuning into their own needs, swept up in a dynamic of appreciation that erodes autonomy. Jung likened the meeting of two personalities to a chemical reaction. If there is any interaction, both are changed. But when one partner is always the giver and the other always the recipient, that transformation is lopsided. The giver begins to derive identity from their role, while the recipient loses the ability to act freely, shackled by mounting unspoken debt. This is why some of the most psychologically controlling relationships are not filled with obvious demands, threats, or rules, but rather endless generosity. The trap isn't built from commands, it's built from gifts, and the longer it lasts, the harder it is to recognize the kindness for what it truly is, a velvet cage that tightens with every gesture. Institutional applications. Though Jung focused primarily on the individual psyche, his insights have profound relevance in understanding institutional forms of control. Today, organizations, from corporations to religious groups to governments, have learned that kindness outperforms coercion when it comes to generating loyalty and compliance. Consider how the modern workplace has evolved. Where rigid hierarchies once reigned, companies now promote a culture of care, offering perks, flexible schedules, and wellness incentives. While these may appear as pure goodwill, they often function as tools of subtle influence. Free meals, lounge spaces, or mental health apps don't just improve morale. They create a sense of emotional indebtedness, binding employees not just to tasks, but to the culture itself. These offerings blur the boundary between employment and emotional allegiance. The most effective strategies are those that align kindness with organizational needs. Flexibility isn't just for the employee's benefit. It ensures they are reachable outside normal hours, Wellness perks foster loyalty and reduce turnover, saving money and increasing control. Just like in personal relationships, the kindness extended by institutions builds psychological obligation. And because it's framed as generosity, those affected often feel not only satisfied, but reluctant to question the cost of their comfort. The after-hours email, the wellness program that puts the burden of stress management on individuals rather than addressing systemic issues, the professional development opportunities that boost productivity without offering proportional compensation. These are not neutral acts. Jung's insight that the pendulum of the mind oscillates between sense and nonsense, not between right and wrong, helps explain why such mechanisms are so effective. They don't provoke moral outrage or ethical debate. Instead, they shift perception. The question becomes not, is this fair, but does this make sense? And within that framework, resistance feels irrational or even ungrateful. This dynamic reaches far beyond corporate environments. Political regimes increasingly frame control as care, cloaking authority in benevolence. Religious organizations blend community support with unspoken rules of conformity. Educational systems expand student services while subtly tightening behavioral and ideological expectations. In each case, the veneer of kindness obscures growing influence, making power feel like support, and silencing dissent not through fear, but through social pressure. The persona and the mask of kindness. Jung's concept of the persona, the curated social mask we present to the world, sheds light on how performed kindness becomes a potent tool for control. The persona, he wrote, is a complex structure mediating between our inner self and society, a kind of mask designed to make a definite impression upon others and to conceal the true nature of the individual. When kindness becomes a persona, detached from authentic feeling and wielded for impression management, it serves both of these functions perfectly. It charms observers while concealing deeper motives. That's why many of history's most controlling figures have also been praised for their warmth and compassion. The political leader known for gentle outreach while advancing restrictive laws. The business executive admired for empathy while making authoritarian decisions. The spiritual teacher whose loving tone hides rigid expectations. The kindness persona works by creating internal conflict in those under its influence. If you feel confined or manipulated by someone widely seen as benevolent, you're likely to question your own perceptions rather than theirs. After all, how can someone so kind be exercising control? Jung's insight, whatever is rejected from the self appears in the world as an event, explains this perfectly. Those who cannot accept their own controlling impulses may unconsciously adopt an exaggerated persona of generosity to compensate. The mask, in essence, becomes the opposite of the face it conceals. Psychological defenses and countermeasures. Jung believed the path to freedom begins with awareness. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. This insight is critical when it comes to defending against kindness-based control. The first line of defense is awareness, recognizing when feelings of gratitude mask unspoken obligations. Ask yourself, did I ask for this? Was it freely chosen, or does it carry an invisible price? How has this gesture shifted the power dynamic? The second defense is understanding the emotional manipulation behind certain kinds of giving. True kindness empowers the recipient. Manipulative kindness binds them. If a gift or favor leaves you feeling more indebted than free, consider whether it was truly generous or strategically disempowering. The third defense is learning to set boundaries with grace. Not every act of kindness must be accepted. Jung reminded us that the shoe that fits one person pinches another, underscoring the need for individual limits. Saying, I appreciate the gesture, but I'm not comfortable accepting that, is not a rejection of kindness, it's a preservation of self. It draws a line between connection and control, gratitude and submission, and ensures that generosity doesn't become a quiet prison. Most importantly, cultivating conscious awareness of these hidden dynamics transforms reciprocity from something compelled into something chosen. When kindness arises from authentic connection rather than an unconscious need to control, it strengthens both individuals instead of diminishing them. Jung remarked that the deepest challenges in life are not solvable, they are to be outgrown. These subtle control mechanisms embedded in kindness are not puzzles to fix, but psychological patterns to be seen clearly and moved beyond through heightened awareness and personal growth. The individuation journey. Jung's concept of individuation, the lifelong journey of becoming psychologically whole and distinct from collective influence, offers the clearest antidote to control disguised as kindness. The privilege of a lifetime, Jung wrote, is to become who you truly are. This transformation demands that we identify and release obligations imposed through social expectations, including those wrapped in warmth and generosity. The individuated person can accept kindness without unconsciously accruing debt. They can appreciate a gesture without being bound to repay it. They can set boundaries around giving without guilt. They understand when kindness supports autonomy and when it quietly undermines it. True psychological freedom doesn't mean we reject kindness or doubt every good intention. It means responding with awareness rather than compulsion, making room for real choice rather than silent obligation. Jung wisely noted that freedom is doing what you like, while also acknowledging what you dislike about what you like. Applied here, it reminds us that even the most appealing forms of generosity may contain elements that constrain us, if accepted without reflection. Conclusion: the road to genuine connection. Understanding how kindness can be used to control doesn't mean abandoning kindness. It means approaching it with deeper consciousness. Jung's work does not advocate for withdrawal from others, but for more honest and intentional relationships. In conscious relationships, giving is not a means of power, but an expression of genuine care for another's independence and self-development. Receiving is not rooted in guilt or dependency, but in openness and trust. Both giver and receiver can recognize the shadow potential in generosity without letting it cloud sincere human connection. And most importantly, awareness of these dynamics allows us to assess our social systems more clearly. We begin to ask, is this support meant to empower or to extract loyalty? Is this kindness helping me grow or subtly keeping me in place? Jung wrote that the pendulum of the mind swings between sense and nonsense, not between right and wrong. By becoming conscious of the control hidden in kindness, we move from senseless gratitude under subtle pressure to mindful participation in true connection. The path to psychological freedom doesn't end with this recognition. It begins there. Knowing your own darkness, Jung taught, is the best method for dealing with the darknesses of other people. When we admit that even kindness can cast a shadow, we create space for something more honest, human exchanges built on awareness, freedom, and truth. The only question that remains is this: in a world where kindness often wears the mask of control, can we learn to see clearly enough to tell the difference? The answer lies not in cynicism, but in the one force Jung trusted most: consciousness.